So, what is a student's course of action when they receive a positive COVID test?
Okay, when a student receives a positive COVID test, the first thing we ask them to do is to, one, isolate themselves to eliminate the spread of COVID, whether it's around friends, family, take the proper precautions so that you're not endangering someone else of being exposed. As far as it relates to school, then we want you to send Mr. Blaze or the nurse or myself a copy of the positive test. You don't have to send it to your teachers because we want to respect your privacy. So with that being said, once you send us that notification that you have a positive test, then our nurse, Mr. Blaze or I, will communicate with you and your family about the next steps. The most important thing is that you're safe, that you're well. If you are positive, but you're still able to do schoolwork, you can still log in and do your work. If not, if you're sick, it's okay. Get well and then log back in. And once your quarantine is over with, whenever you test negative at the end of those days, then you can come back to school.
So then does a student have to wait the 14 days and then additionally test negative, or the 10 days and then additionally test negative, or once they receive a negative test, can they come back?
So it depends on, it's all a case-by-case basis. And so if you get tested and you're positive, the doctors are going to look at the first day of symptoms. And from those first symptoms, they're going to say, okay, we start counting 14 days then. If you were tested fairly soon, like the first, second day of symptoms, and you start counting back and it's 10, if you get a negative test at around 10 days, you can send that negative test back to us. And if you've been free 24 hours without a fever, without having to use like an Advil or Tylenol to reduce the fever, so you're symptom free and you have a negative test, you give that to the nurse, and then the nurse will look at it and say, okay, the timeline is good, the negative test is good, you don't have any symptoms, you're good to come back.
Okay.
The 14-day comes into effect if you get the positive test, but you don't want to get a second test. If you go the entire 14 days, and at the end of the 14 days, you're still not exhibiting any symptoms, then you can come back. But if you still have symptoms after 14 days, then we're going to tell you to go back and check with your doctor so that you can get a second test. Because we want to see, are the symptoms still related to COVID still being active in the body, or is it something else that's causing you to have those symptoms?
If a student is presenting symptoms of coronavirus, what should they do?
If a student has symptoms of coronavirus, then the first thing we ask them to do is to decide and check with their parents or their doctors, are these symptoms typical for a student? If someone typically has allergies and they've been diagnosed with allergies and they have post-nasal drip or they have itchy eyes or anything of the sort, if that's in your normal wheelhouse, then you're good to be you. When you have the health screener every morning, it goes through that checklist. The key thing in there says, are these not normal for the student? So if they're not normal, stay home. It's okay. Fill out the screener honestly. We don't want people to not be truthful because, again, this is all on the honor system. Stay home, log in for your classes. And what we ask for you to do, in order to return, it doesn't mean you necessarily need to get a COVID test. What it may mean, you might need to have a visit with your doctor to confirm that it's something else. That's called an alternative diagnosis. If the doctor confirms and says, hey, it is strep, it's just a regular virus, it is allergies, that alternative diagnosis is good enough for you to turn in to still come back to school. Just because you have a symptom doesn't necessarily mean you have to go get a COVID test. We just want to be sure that when you do return, that it's safe for you and for everyone else.
Okay, and then if there's a student with a prolonged exposure to coronavirus, either here at their own home, they have a family member who has it, what is their course of action?
Okay, so if you are deemed, and again, to be in close contact, and again, every single one of these is a case-by-case basis. Were you outside? Were you in a small room? Were you wearing a mask? Were you not wearing a mask? But by the CDC definition, it's more than 15 minutes, less than 6 feet away. And so if you've had direct exposure, then we're going to say, okay, let's have you stay home, self-quarantine, let's monitor. The key part in that, the best practice, what most medical experts recommend, if you're going to get tested, wait 72 hours to after you have been directly exposed. Just because you've been exposed right now, if I go get a test, the virus may not show up in your body. So we don't want you to think, I'm clear, I'm going to come on back. So stay home for 72 hours, but also begin to self-isolate from other members in your home. Because if you are positive or carrying it, even if you're asymptomatic, we don't want you to spread it to other family members or other friends. So in 72 hours, go take the test. If the test is negative, then you can send that into the school, and then that will be your ticket to come back to in-person if you are an in-person person.
Perfect. And then at what degree of exposure, so someone getting a positive test in a class or someone presenting symptoms in a class or an exposure, do you let other classmates know? Okay, so the school and the school district responsibility is, and this is where we need the students to be honest and to help us out. If you know that you're positive or you have symptoms or you've been exposed, and you send us that test and says, I am positive, the first thing we're going to ask is, who else were you in close contact with? We need you to think about before school, on the bus, riding to school, during Spartan time, during lunchtime, after school. Because we have to start asking the questions, were these other individuals directly exposed to this person? We got to think about the teachers. We think about the classes. So the teachers, they should have a seating chart. They should know who's sitting where, so that we can see who was close, who was not close. So if you are deemed to be considered directly exposed, then the school, we will contact the family and we will say, we cannot tell you who, unless the family says, Ray Morris Barnes' family says, I give you permission to tell this family that it was me so that they will know. And if the parents say, yes, you can let these individuals know that it was my child, then we can say, hey, listen, Ray Morris sat close to you. He's been confirmed positive. They want you to know so that you can take the proper precautions to protect yourself and the rest of your family. If the family doesn't give us permission to share anything, then the only thing that we will be able to say is, you were exposed to someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. At this time, we need you to self-quarantine. We can't make a mandate that you get a test, but here's the process. It's going back to the other question that need to be followed as far as timeline of when you can return, symptoms, negative tests, so forth and so on. Those things will have to take place before you can return to school. So we could tell you the name with the family's permission, but by law, we cannot say what class, boy, girl, anything like that, unless the family gives us permission. We respect your privacy. What message would you like to send to those coming to school with symptoms simply because they don't feel sick enough? And these are abnormal symptoms for them, but they just don't think they feel sick enough to stay home.
Well, the only reason that we're able to be in school now is based on the trust that everyone's going to play by the same set of rules. And I think if at any point anyone thinks, well, I'm not sick enough, so I'm still going to go to school, we run the risk of jeopardizing school for everyone. I am grateful that we've gone a whole week and right now a week and a half, and we haven't had any confirmed positive cases on campus. It doesn't mean there aren't positive people in the community. It just means they've abided by the plan and they stayed home, and so we appreciate them doing their part to help schools stay open. So I would encourage anyone who thinks that they're not sick enough but they have the symptoms, don't risk it for yourself and don't risk it for each other, because school will only stay open based on if we do our part to keep it open. Most transmissions so far, and I'm not saying that everything happens at the school or outside of school, but they're happening because of things that people are doing outside of school. When people let their guards down, when they don't wear masks, when they don't socially distance, and we get this idea that it won't happen to me. And sometimes, honestly, I found myself, as soon as I leave the store, the first thing I do is pull my mask on. Oh, man, can't believe I wore it in there. But I try to do my part, but I know it can get frustrating. I know it can be tired, especially in Houston when the humidity is like 150%, and it makes it really more difficult to breathe out of this. I get it. But I think about my family, and I think about the others who I'm walking by, and so I do the right thing because I have respect for myself, but I have respect for others.
That kind of leads me into my next question of what students are doing off campus can obviously affect what happens on campus. Correct. Do you have anything you wanted to say to people who are maybe not following protocols off campus about how that can really affect us on campus?
Yeah. Like right now, we're about 3 to 4 weeks away from homecoming. And as a school, we cannot have a homecoming dance like we typically could because we still can't have large gatherings. Because that environment has shown by some studies to fester an environment for the virus to spread amongst participants. So as a school, we've chosen to have the game. We can still do a homecoming court, and we'll work on the details to make sure that the homecoming court's there, and we can figure out things about mums and this, that, and the other. So as much as we can do, we will do, but just not the dance. But what I have heard from several parents in our community is that there begin to be conversations about private parties off campus. And what I would say to any students or any parents who are listening to this, please think about the entire school. Because if you have a party and students are exposed and it spreads, we're not going to be able to come back to school. We're all going to have to be at home. And even though it may not have spread at school, all of those students, if they're in person, affect what we do here. And so we would have to, as a precaution, even for those who were not at the party, we would have to close school down just to make sure that those who were not there don't get exposed and don't get sick. So we can't tell you how to live your life outside of school, but what I can tell you, how you live your life outside of school has a direct impact on us being able to have school in person. So again, please think about everyone.
And then last question, masks are obviously new for everyone.
Yes.
They can be frustrating, hard, even annoying at times. But can you just tell us how important it is that students wear their mask in class and at honestly all times unless they're eating or drinking?
So I know that masks can be a real political divider. Everything can be a political divider. iPhone versus Android, T-Mobile versus AT&T. So masks are just a new thing. And I think masks have come to symbolize our inability to be able to be respectful of each other. I'm just going to call it like it is. There are studies that show how effective masks can be. I think there was a study that came out, or a report in, I think it was back in April. The salon owner had worked on so many different people's like haircuts and styles and whatever. She ended up being positive, but none of her clients ended up testing positive because they both wore masks. So that's like one of the, and that was here in Dallas. So I know some people have personal opinions on, I am going to wear a mask, I don't want to wear a mask. I'm not going to get into the political piece of it, but I can tell you as a school district, and according to the governing body, TEA, masks are required for in-person instruction. So, one, because it's a requirement, we have to do it. But secondly, based on the studies that have been shown, masks have been effective in reducing the amount of transmission. So, whether you disagree with masks being appropriate or not, here's the other portion that I really need students to understand. It's also a level of comfort of the teachers and your other students that's in the same classroom. And so there are teachers who are very apprehensive about being back in classrooms with students. And then for a student to say, I'm not going to wear my mask, that teacher may choose not to wear a mask. So again, we're not trying to tell you that your opinion doesn't matter. I'm not trying to tell you that your rights are being infringed upon. What I'm telling you is we all need everyone to abide by the same rules so that we all can have a peace of mind that we are doing the best thing that we can to keep Stratford open. But if we start having students start pulling down masks and choosing not to wear masks, then we've got a discipline issue, but we also have a culture issue where it's a us versus them. And I am committed to making sure that it's not an us versus them. It is we are all in this, and we're going to find a way to overcome this. Right now, we're wearing masks, and hopefully soon enough, we won't have to wear masks. But for now, let's just do the right thing.